For years, Christians all over the world have longed for Jesus to return and bring them glory. However, there are some warning signs to mark first. One of them is the building of a third temple. As we speak, preparations for rebuilding the third temple are already starting in Israel. If this becomes a reality in the future, what is the significance of this temple? What relevance does it have to the rapture? Keep watching for better clarification. The Sanhedrin was an assembly of several Jewish elders with a number range of 23 to 71. This gathering was revised by the Orthodox Jewish who intended to rebuild the Jewish temple properly. The Orthodox Jewish believed that the world's redemption lies in rebuilding the temple. Gershon Salomon, the director of the Temple Mount Faithful, said, "Building the third temple is an act that must be done to complete the restoration of the people in the land of the Bible. I cannot picture an Israel state in this country without the temple mounted in its center." Many religious Jewish did not support the idea simply because they adopted the dispersion mentally and believed everything would happen spiritually. They had accepted the present political situation of the Temple Mount controlled by the Muslims. Jewish leaders in the temple believed that the Jewish people were not living a spiritual life as directed by God because of the absence of the divine presence regarded as the Shekinah in the world. Rabbi Chaim Richman, the director of the Temple Institute, says the divine presence of God can only be brought up through the temple. We cannot attain our spiritual state without the temple. Following the destruction of the Second Temple, the Jewish people could no longer offer their sacrifices. Parts of the mitzvot commandments in the Torah cannot be carried out completely without a temple. The effort placed into restoring the temple is mainly to restore their faith and belief and to receive the Shekinah. The Jewish people no longer offered their sacrifices in an animal form, which was the first and earliest method of presenting offerings. They now offer prayers, repentance, and charity. Many thought that the sacrifice of animals would be demolished and never practiced again. This isn't so in the Bible prophecy. The Lord told the prophet Ezekiel in Ezekiel 42:13 that all sacrifices and offerings would in the future be preserved in the temple, for it is a holy land. The past temples were regarded as not just a building, but earthly dwelling places for the presence of the highest God. Many questions arose, not just from the Jewish community, but from all the believers of Yeshua. The organization behind the preparation for the Third Temple and the rebirth of the sacrificial worship are the Temple Mount and the Eretz Israel Faithful Movement, though other organizations have plans to set up too. While some want a tabernacle-style tent, others want to build a tabernacle by the side of the temple. This is because Chaim Richman said in one of his Mythbuster videos that buildings don't fall from heaven. It's an order from the highest to build the temple, and the Jews should apply all 613 mitzvot to set up the temple. The Third Temple is expected to restore light into the world, the light they believed left the Temple Mount after the sudden disappearance of the Lord's presence. Chaim Richman added that the temple will unite all creation to one another. This holy temple gives all humans a relationship with God. It provides opportunities for every individual to stand up to their potential. The ritual garments, vessels, even the golden menorah, the seven-branched candelabra, have been crafted along with Levitical musical instruments such as silver trumpets, lyres, and harps to worship the Lord, just as King David did 3,000 years ago. The final element, the red heifer, is being cultured in Israel to be presented as a sacrifice for the ritual purification of the priests and the vessels, so they can properly enter the holiest area on earth. Everything has been put into place for the rebuilding of the temple. Well, everything except the land space to build on. After the liberation of the Mount in 1967, the Muslim world has made great efforts to claim the entire 37-acre, 150,000 square meters platform as its own sacred land, calling the site in Arabic El Haram al-Sharif, the noble sanctuary. Would a new Jewish temple successfully be built? The Jewish are banned by the Israeli from praying at the site. The Muslim women in black, who maintain a regular visit to the site, accosted the Jews at the mere sight of them. The Islamic authorities denied that a temple ever existed at the site. But archaeologists in decades-old research discovered that the site where the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which the Muslims believed was mounted by Abraham, was once a Jewish ritual preparation entrance to the temple. Robert Hamilton, a British archaeologist, once found some ornaments beneath the mosque. This ornament was a Jewish mikveh used for ritual purification in those days. These discoveries, which were hidden deep by the Muslim officials because they brought embarrassment to the Muslim officials, are now regarded as the evidence needed to prove that the ancient temple stood on the modern mount and was once a center for Jewish worship. The Sanhedrin had taken notable steps toward the restoration of the future temple. One big project carried out by the group was the planting of the biblical temple forest, which will satisfy the architectural needs of the third temple. The Jewish tradition believed that the red heifer mixed with water was necessary for purifying the Jews to prepare them for their service to the temple. So far, during the first and second temple, in about 1,000 years of existence, only 9 red heifers were used for these presentations. According to the Jewish tradition, the 10th one would be used by God Himself. The Sanhedrin and the Temple movement revived temple ceremonies to train those from a priestly class called the Kohanim. Parts of this training include special tutoring on the duties of a priest, the proper use of ritual vessels created for the use in the third temple, and how to present offerings on a newly constructed altar of burnt offerings and purification practices. This altar is unique. After all, it was designed to be disassembled and quickly reassembled in its proper permanent location, because the people of Israel must build an altar exclusively on the site of the original altar on Mount Moriah, the Temple Mount. When the time is right, it will be reassembled on the mount in the temple, enabling the sacrificial service to be resumed without delay. While the temple movement continues to prepare for the rebuilding of the temple, most understand that some political action must take place to reverse the present situation of control of the mount by Muslims to allow for Jewish access. A recent rediscovery of the Temple Institute has been the reestablishment of the science behind the biblical production of scarlets. This scarlet was used in the high priest's garment, the curtains in separating the Holy of Holies from the holy place in the temple. It was also an ingredient used in the mixture combined with the ashes of the red heifer. The reality of the Temple Mount cannot be regarded as simple. It is exceptionally delicate and complicated. This is one of those cases in which a judicial ruling is not a reasonable way to decide the dispute, and a decision of this kind goes beyond the boundaries of the law. The political echelon, not the court, must give content and meaning to the historical call. The Temple Mount is ours. In other words, this must be a political, not legal action. Those who understand Daniel's prophecy of the 17th week know that it is a future political leader, the Antichrist of Revelation 13, who will one day make a deceptive covenant with the Jewish leaders, leading to the rebuilding of the third temple. The rebuilding of the temple by the Jews would bring back the sacrificial system of Mosaic law. The Jews desperately want to resume the full practice of their faith and are tired of waiting for the rebirth of the temple. On the other hand, the Muslim nation wants to eliminate the Jews and is also tired of waiting. However, they are both ready to strike against each other. Who strikes first remains unknown, but after some time, sacrifice will resume on the Temple Mount, and the people of Jerusalem would be attacked. Let's talk about the importance of the rebirth of the temple. The temple is a large part of Jewish life. Therefore, rebuilding it will play a major role in restoring their faith. The Jewish hold strongly to the temple, and the rebirth will bring back divine peace, and the Messiah will visit them at the temple. The fact that Ezekiel's vision of the temple of God is measured and defined so minutely suggests a physical structure, not merely a spiritual or symbolic one. To the same effect is the fact that the measurements are given in long cubits, a historical building or construction term. If Ezekiel's temple was intended by God to be allegorical or spiritual or heavenly only, there would be absolutely no purpose in giving its detailed and precise measurements in common human construction terms. God does not intentionally mislead. The idea that Ezekiel's temple is a vision of heaven is banned in the Bible. This was proven in Revelations 21:22. The Jewish agreed logically that Ezekiel cannot give us a prophecy about a heavenly temple if heaven has no temple. Plus, Ezekiel's description of the division of the land with its holy district and tribal divisions has never even remotely been fulfilled yet. These reasons lead me to conclude that Ezekiel's vision of the temple will be fulfilled in our future, most likely during the millennium. So the question is simply this: if no past temple fits Ezekiel's vision, and heaven won't have a temple, why did God give the vision to Ezekiel, unless it was a blueprint of a physical structure to be built? Well, let's find out. The rebuilding of the temple would lead to the resumption of daily sacrifice. Since Herod's temple was destroyed, there haven't been any Jewish daily sacrifices. For this to end, the daily Jewish sacrifice has to continue. This can only be possible when the temple is at least partially restored, or a space for this sacrifice is being provided. The Jews have refused to resume the daily sacrifice without rebuilding the holy walls and a clean space at the Temple Mount, where the Holy of Holies would return. This holiest holy of the Jews can only be built on the Temple Mount. There are Jews in Jerusalem at this very moment who know the exact spot on the Temple Mount where the Holy of Holies must go. There is only one place things can occur. This is to say, the Jews do not consider themselves at liberty to move the Holy of Holies from its historic location. They are obligated to rebuild it where God first placed it. The Jews would want to resume and also be the ones to rebuild the temple. They had no reason to believe the Mosaic sacrificial system had been revoked. To them, the Mosaic laws are still in existence. They are patiently waiting for the opportunity to resume their sacrificial system. The temple to the Jews is a seat of the government. The Messiah, God, would ascend to the throne as their king and priest. The temple will have a governmental purpose that has nothing to do with sacrifices of atonement. The temple and the tabernacle before it was where the glory of God, the very presence of God, dwelt. After the destruction of the Jerusalem temple in 70 AD, the physical presence of God and the Shekinah glory was never manifested anywhere on earth. But upon Jesus' return to earth, all this will change, and he will need a physical place, a building, to dwell. Therefore, the great reason behind this rebuild. The restoration of Israel demands the rebuilding of this great temple. All iterations of the Jewish temple to date, the tabernacle, the first temple, and the second temple, were constructed during that prior age before Christ's first advent. Not only that, but the beginning and the end of age itself are marked by the creation and destruction of the temple. Do you really think this was all by accident? Do the Jewish temple's rise and fall coincide with historical ages as a matter of random chance? So too, when Jesus returns, the temple that he builds will mark the beginning of the kingdom age and the restoration of Israel as the first among the nations. I dare say that the existence of a Jewish temple and the preeminence of Israel among the nations of the earth are so intertwined that neither can exist without the other. So, if Israel is to be restored, the temple must be rebuilt. If the temple is rebuilt, the restoration of Israel must accompany it. The third temple will not be built by Christians, but by the Jews. Common Christian beliefs that any physical temple was obsoleted by Christ will play no part in the decision whether to build a new temple. Rather, it will be driven by Jewish beliefs. And the prevailing belief among rabbinic Jews is that of the messianic era, the Golden Age. The Messiah will come, and a third temple will be built. We must realize how important the rebuilding of the temple is to the Jews. First, all Jews, whether Orthodox, Conservative, or Reformed, are still looking for a Messiah. Whether they foresee the resumption of sacrifices or not, they associate rebuilding the temple with the coming of the Messiah. Thus, rebuilding the temple can be a way to anticipate or possibly hasten the Messiah's coming. Second, all Jews realize that rebuilding the temple will not happen until they control the Temple Mount, something they desperately want to do. In their minds, whoever controls the Temple Mount will control Jerusalem and all of Israel. The desire of the Jews is not likely to fade away because of a little political backlash. They will not be put off because they can't get to the Temple Mount now. Suppose anything, political volatility is not going to diminish in the future. In that case, it will intensify, and the Jews know this. As we examine the scriptures, we believe that the third temple will not be completed until after Christ returns. However, that's not to say that the Jews won't try to get it started earlier. We tend to put together the verses regarding the abomination of desolation and the stopping of sacrifices to conclude that the Jews will make a future first effort to rebuild the temple. This effort may or may not fail, that is, to be completed. It may be the rebuilding effort prophesied in Daniel 9:27, which is cut off before completion. Still, this unfinished effort may have the effect of clearing the Temple Mount area, and that may be enough to start the regular sacrifices. The Jews will likely seize any opportunity to rebuild, such as a catastrophic event destroying the Muslim structures on the Temple Mount due to a military conflict. It doesn't matter how or why the Temple Mount has become clear, whether from destruction by Zionists or a wayward rocket launched from a Muslim area. And no matter why the Jews try to rebuild the temple, the Muslims will oppose and resist it. Since Jesus has already returned, this temple will never suffer the anger of the abomination of desolation and will last 1,000 years. Nor can any temple built by Christ after the nations are conquered be trampled underfoot by the nations for 42 months. Jesus will not return until after those things take place. So anything he builds will not be compromised or defiled. One possibility that all this world manifests into a reality was found in an academic book on the political issues of the Temple Mount. Emphasis was laid upon the international community's interest in sites. Under the principle of the heritage of humanity, representatives from the international community must be included as mediators and guarantors. Those who seek knowledge of biblical prophecies already know that the Antichrist will be followed by both the political and religious leaders, making this proposal a reality, and finally, remounting the Jews' temple so the Messiah can ascend his throne and return the divine presence back to the Jews' land, and their belief would forever have a stand in the land and the world. It's thrilling yet exciting to see these new developments going on in the land of Israel towards rebuilding the third temple following the destruction of the first and second temple in ancient times. Let us keep our fingers crossed and hope that this third temple is rebuilt as soon as it can, as we await the second coming of our Messiah, as a redemption to mankind and hopefully a divine restoration to the earth. The question that the Messiah's second coming might be the end of the earth is a question no one has answered to date. But as we continue through these times, the Prince of Peace, that is, the Yeshua HaMashiach to the Jewish people, will dwell in them and bring peace and great joy they've never experienced before. The big question in everyone's mind is, will the third temple be Ezekiel's temple, where the divine presence will once again reside? Or will some other presence reside in another temple? Will the Messiah truly come after the rebirth of the temple? Fill us in with your thoughts in the comments section below. And remember to like, share, and subscribe so you keep on getting interesting content from us.